Welcome to Authors Revealed. I'm Becky Anderson. We're so excited. We have the debut novel of one of our local authors. It's Michael Gurley's The Long Season, and the proceeds from his launch event went to Youth Outlook to help kids in all sorts of setters for LGBTQ and other youth. Well, Michael, welcome back to Naperville and Anderson's.
Thank you.
I know the last time you were here was the launch of your book, The Long Season, and I know that was a different kind of scene. You had a huge crowd here.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you for coming back and sitting down and talking with me.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, this is wonderful. So I know this journey to this book and its publication is a really unique story, and but first I want to ask you just where the seed for this story began to grow, and what elements brought it together and really started to make it really grow into a novel.
Mm-hmm. I think that I get asked where did I get the idea from, and I think about like these really funny responses from like Neil Gaiman, who said he told this elaborate story about sacrificing chickens at midnight or whatever to get like ideas or whatever, and I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah,
but
right.
Mine was more realistic. I was or more real, I should say. I was flipping through a hockey chronicle. Somebody had given me as a present.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big hockey fan,
Yeah, right.
and I think you need to be to write a hockey book.
Yeah,
and I
think so.
was flipping through the book at all these old wonderful pictures, and I came across this picture of the 1907 Kenora Thistles hockey team from Kenora in Canada, and they won the Stanley Cup in 1907. They were great underdogs, and here was this picture of this team. And back then, photos were a little more expensive,
Sure.
and a little bit more elaborate in terms of, it wasn't a selfie nation. This was a time when people had to really plan where they were going to sit and how they were going to look, because they were a little expensive and took a little longer. And there was this picture of these tough Iron Men hockey players kind of draped all over each other, and one of them wasn't looking forward, he was looking sideways at another one of the guys. And I just thought, what if?
Yeah.
What if? What if they were together? What if there was some secret? And that consumed me for like 6 months while I wrote this book. That idea of,
Sure.
what if, you know, what would happen to them?
So then, stepping forward, then we hosted, and I can't remember how long ago it was, because we've done a couple of them.
2013.
Was it 2013?
Yeah.
We hosted a Apalooza,
Mm-hmm.
and we had the book doctors here because they had written a book, How to Get Your Book Published, and it was Ariel Eckstedt and Henry David Steary. And they had written this great book about how, but what they do is a Apalooza, and we invited in a couple of editors or agents to be our judges.
Yeah.
And people pitch. So tell us a little bit about the pitch, because you were our grand prize winner. So I want to know how nervous were you doing the pitch for this novel? Because the grand prize was, well, you can tell us.
Yeah,
but it was a really exciting event. We had, I don't know, a couple of hundred people here. It was pretty crowded. And it was so, I mean, I remember you when you won. It was so incredible, the look on your face. But tell us a little bit about that experience.
Well, you know, somebody told me I had finished the book, and I was figuring out marketing and what to do. And, you know, it's my first book. I had no idea what to do. And somebody told me, hey, Anderson's Bookshop, right around the corner from your house, is having this thing called Apalooza. Like, what's that? It's American Idol for books. You know, and they give you 60 seconds to pitch your idea, your best pitch. They cut you off at 60 seconds. I remember David and Ariel, David was saying, he goes, folks, I don't care what you're saying, at 60 seconds you're done, you're off the stage, we're hitting the button. And I'm like, oh, no, that's nervousness, you know. And there was, I don't know how many, 150, 200 people in the audience, and not everybody would get up to do the pitch. And I thought, I'm going to do this. So I created a sell sheet. I looked up on the internet like what a sell sheets look like, and I made one, and had some help with that, and brought it in, and I had my pitch on the iPad, and I was ready to go. And I talk a lot at my job, so I wasn't too nervous about the actual talking part. It was the nervousness of, what if my idea is no good? What if no one will like it? What if I don't win? I probably won't win. And I just let all that go, and I said, have fun with it. And it was a fun environment, and they made it fun, and they didn't roast anybody. That was the great thing about it. Very true. Yeah. They didn't make anybody feel awful, and there were some really good pitches. And there were some people who just kind of had ideas, you know, and wanted to hear what people thought about them. And I got up there and delivered it, and right behind me, like a foot and a half behind me, I could hear them talking while I'm pitching, because I'm not facing them, I'm facing the crowd, as you remember.
Right.
And
right.
they were going, ooh, ooh, I like that. And although that's good, it was a little nerve-wracking
Yeah,
about
right.
them talking, because I'm like, I only have 60 seconds, you know.
Yeah.
And then I waited. And then when I won, it was amazing. And they were really great. So what you win when you win a pitch Apalooza is from the book doctors, who are really great people. You win their guidance and mentorship, and not just for a set period of time, or not just for a few ideas, but I've been able to connect with them a lot over the last couple of years.
Great. Yeah.
Having them proofread a couple of pages here and there, or 2-page synopsis for pitching the book to people. So they've helped me with that. And then ultimately, they connected me with the editor, Jerry Wheeler, who's amazing.
Yeah.
We talk about that maybe more later, but
Yeah.
and they connected me with Boldstroke Books, who published the book, and that was great. So they kind of streamlined my writing career for me.
Right.
Yeah.
So basically, the grand prize was you're getting published.
I'm getting published.
They
yeah,
loved
yeah.
your idea. They loved your pitch. So and you did a great job. So it was
yeah.
just absolutely wonderful.
And I made a great friend out of it. Andrea Beatty is one of the judges
Yeah,
that night.
she was one of the judges.
Yes.
That's right.
And we've become
Oh, she's great.
friends. Yeah, she's great.
She
So
lives
she was
in
here at
Naperville.
my
Yeah,
book night.
right. Yeah. So, tell us a little bit about Brett Bennett. He's our, your main protagonist here. And he's a farm boy. He's 18 years old, but he's quite a hockey player. And he's now heading towards the big leagues. So tell us a little bit about him, about his DNA, and where you came up with this character, and what parts went into him.
Brett Bennett is this hockey hopeful. I've written that on the back cover. He's this guy who is from a small town, Delavan, Wisconsin, which I'm familiar with. I go to very often for vacations, and it's the home of the circus. It's this circus town that dried up in like 1895. But for my book, I zhuzhed that a little bit so it would cross over with his background. So he's this like farm boy with a circus connection, and all they have is hockey in his life, and his parents push him for hockey, and they're very cold and distant. So he has this drive to please them that can never be satisfied. And he also suffers from obsessive compulsive disorder. And in the book, that comes up very often as a sidetrack or deterrent for him making a choice, or having to have somebody intervene with him about a choice, because he gets stuck with repetitive counting throughout the book. So he's got this great skill. He's this amazing hockey player that has these secrets. He's got this nervous disorder that hasn't been diagnosed yet. There's no medications for it yet.
Yeah.
The only medications they give you was Nervine pills, which is basically like a sedative.
Yeah.
You can't play hockey when you're taking a sedative, or maybe you can't play very well.
Right.
And that's who he is. He comes to the city of Milwaukee. He gets scouted. He goes to Milwaukee, and then he gets scouted there to come to Chicago, and that's where we pick up, is that he's being scouted at the beginning of the book. So he has all these dreams of being this huge hockey player, but going into public life with this, at the time, a terrible secret.
Yeah, right.
And that's kind of the beginning of our story.
Yeah. And interesting, you set this in the time period of the Roaring 20s, in the 20s in Chicago. And I know you grew up in Chicago, close to some of Al Capone's hangouts and stuff like that. So what a great period to set it in. But also, I want to know what kind of research you did about the time period, and also when you think of how we watch the Blackhawks today, and the terminology and the way the game's played, even the equipment, everything is so different. Did you do a lot of research about what hockey was like in the 20s?
None. I just
None.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Well, that's amazing. Maybe you didn't.
I'm a huge history nut, and
Yeah.
I research probably more than I should have. I probably delved, I went down into the internet rabbit hole researching, or into the library, or into here, by the way, looking for things into your bookshop, and I get lost a little bit in that. But I researched a lot, and I loved hearing about the history of Chicago, and that Al Capone, like you mentioned. I used to work across the street from Al Capone's old house in Cicero.
Oh, wow.
And it was I worked at a union hall, and I always wondered if they were connected a little bit.
Cicero, yeah. Okay.
But yeah, one of the craziest things is that hockey players, and this is pretty common knowledge, hockey players, goalies, didn't wear masks.
I can't imagine. I cannot imagine.
The hockey equipment and the workout regime, the routines weren't the same, so they weren't shooting it as fast. So instead of throwing it at you at 88 miles an hour,
Yeah.
it was only 75 miles an hour.
Only.
Only.
Only, yeah, right.
So yeah, it was a lot changed in the game. Equipment, training, behind the where the glass is now, everybody's like, you get banged up against the glass. It was cage back then. So there was like, that you could really get hurt doing that.
Sure, sure. Yeah. So you know what? You were published by Boldstroke Books, which is an LGBTQ literature they published. How did that connection come across? I mean, did the series help you, Ariel and John help you get that, or how did that work out?
Yeah, they had actually done a Apalooza somewhere else with the owner of Boldstroke Books, so they had kept that connection. So they just emailed her and said, "Are you interested in this idea?" And I got included in some of those emails and introductions.
Yeah.
And they said, "Yes, send us the manuscript and we'll review it." And really, after that point, it was up to them to decide, yeah, that's for us, or no, it's not. And I think it's kind of an interesting sell. It's different than a lot that's out there. A historical fiction about gay men in the Roaring '20s playing hockey.
Yeah, right.
It's very different than most of the stuff that's out there.
Yeah, for
I mean, there are a
sure.
few hockey books, and there's some with gay characters in
Right,
them,
yeah.
which are wonderful. I have found after I wrote the book,
Yeah.
but they're very different. They're all contemporary.
Right.
So it was up to them to decide, yeah, I want that or no. And then they said it was like a 14-week turnaround it was supposed to be.
Wow.
And that's very quick
That
in
is.
the publishing
oh my
industry.
Gosh, for sure.
And I think 3 weeks later, they emailed me and said, "Here's your contract. We want your book."
Wow, that's
Yeah.
so cool.
Yeah, so it
So
was quick.
I love the cover on the book. Did
Thank
you
you.
have any say on what the imagery they put on the front of the cover?
Yes, my husband, Jason Burian, is a graphic designer, and he's also a photographer. So I kind of cheated a little bit. and Boldstroke Books said, "Hey, give me some ideas about what you want on the cover, and then you're allowed to send images or a cover if you'd like to pitch, but it's still up to them what gets on there." And so I did all these things, and I looked at all these covers that I love, and I sent them all this information, pages and pages of what I want, what I don't want, and then I sent them this, and the next day they said, "Well, I think we've selected your cover." I'm like, "Oh yeah?" Like, "Yeah, it's Jason's."
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool.
So,
that's wonderful.
so they had him
Yeah.
tweak it a little bit. They tweaked it a
Yeah.
little bit, and it's pretty awesome. I really love it.
Oh, that's so great. So, the other character in the book, I'm going to
Jean-Paul.
Jean-Paul Moreau. He's shy, more introverted. Sort of reclusive, but a goalie. And tell us a little bit about the relationship between Brett and Jean-Paul, and also about how they meet and what happens.
Jean-Paul is a goalie, and first of all, hockey fans know, and no offense to any goalies, that goalies have their own peccadillos. They're very superstitious people. There's a lot of great hockey stories and legends about goalies' odd patterns. So I put a lot of that into Jean-Paul. He's a very interesting character with a lot of flaws, deep and some shallow. And they meet because Brett shows up with his friend to the first day of training, and run into Jean-Paul. They get mistreated by some of the other players, and when they all leave, Jean-Paul pulls them into some hijinks that gets them into even deeper trouble. As soon as he meets him, he's like this rakish, rogue character that's shy off to his own, but he jumps right in and gives them a hard time and gets them in trouble. So he becomes this intriguing character to Brett. Not only is he attracted to him, but his personality is attractive and interesting.
So this book, you've managed to combine a lot of things that you love.
Yes.
Hockey, the Roaring '20s, right, in history, and a lot of passions for all this, and some of the history of Chicago and all that. So that had to be a lot of fun to combine a lot of those loves of yours.
Oh yeah. I had a lot of fun with it because, like I said, I love all those the categories of the book, but doing the research and trying to find interesting tidbits to throw in, and I watched a lot of old game films to help me with writing game action sequences, because there's a few of those in there. And I watched all these videos of Maurice the Rocket Richard from Montreal, Canadiens from the 40s and 50s. And I'm like, wow, that's like how I envision Brett to be. And so I put some characters from real history characters into my characters. And that was fun for me, because it got to bring like those characters alive. And I used a lot of real characters from history, like the Field family and the Robert Allerton, and all the hockey players except for the main characters were real people. So it was fun for me, because I love history and I got to bring them alive. And hopefully nobody's mad at me for changing their personalities at all.
Well, Marshall Field was an interesting guy, but all those, putting those elements of Chicago history in it, I think made it that much more powerful. So I thought it was really great that way. So I want to know, what is your earliest recollection of wanting to be a writer? Do you remember how old you were, and what was that first thing you wrote that you were proud of, or maybe do you remember anything like that?
I do. My grandmother, Pearl, she in Mississippi, where my family's from, she always supported our family. And my father wrote in poetry and had it published in papers. And my uncle James is actually J.E. Gurley. He's a pretty prolific horror writer right now. And in that same room where they grew up, they had left their typewriter. And I was, 11, 12. And my grandmother got paper out. I said, hey, does this work? And she got out paper and cut off the little tabs where she had to pull it off the ream, and said, go ahead. And old typewriters, clack, 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 clack. 2 in the morning, they never told me to stop making noise. They never told me to shut it down, and they said, just keep going, no matter how awful the writing might have been. And I remember, because I just pulled out one the other day, I wrote a knockoff of the movie Strange Brew with Rick Moranis.
Oh my gosh, how funny.
I just put my friend and I in the roles, and I basically copied the movie in as a writing exercise, I guess.
Well, like fan fiction.
It makes me chuckle now when I read it. It's kind of funny.
That's great.
There weren't a lot of quotes where there should have been, and there weren't a lot of commas, but it was very funny. And so that mentoring of,
and then encouragement.
Your grandmother saying, go ahead, honey, make as much noise as you want.
Yeah.
She'd kind of been through it already, I think, with her 2 sons. Like, go ahead and create and write it and do it.
Right. Oh, that's so cool.
So I actually dedicated the book to my grandmother.
Yeah. So, Mike, you work with special needs kids, and we were talking before we sat down about you work with sort of K through 12 kids. Tell us a little bit about that, your work that you do, your day job, and how has that, working with children like that, and with all different types of needs, affected you as a person, but also, how it informs you as a writer?
I think that there's a lot of challenges to working with children with special needs that requires a lot of patience and requires a lot of knowledge and study and collaborative working and working with parents. And I really enjoy working with all the different fields of teachers and social workers and other administrators and parents and district people. That stuff is it's energizing to me when it turns into a kid making a good positive change, and that's the whole business, really, working with kids, is to help them become great adults.
Right.
So that working with that population has helped me understand mental health and mental health issues, and what young people want, and how they think, at least a little bit. I mean, I'm maybe a little older now, but at least I connect a little bit with it. So that filters into my thinking of Jean-Paul, or Brett, who's 18, and Jean-Paul, who's only 25. So that filters into that knowledge of how people think. And like I said earlier, Brett has OCD way before it was diagnosed. So I have a lot of experience with working with people with OCD and neurological issues, and so that fed into it. I didn't have to do a lot of research on that, because I knew some of that.
Yeah, sure, exactly. So I know you've written some comics and some poetry. So tell us a little bit about that and those things, those different genres that you write.
It is. I'm a huge comic book fan. We're sitting one aisle over from the comic book. It's probably good, because it keeps me focused, not looking at all the comic books. I've sent a lot of scripts to Marvel that I had written, trying to get them involved. And I got hooked up with an editor at Marvel Comics for a while, and it seemed like the same feedback and the same thing is like, this is great, keep submitting. And after I could wallpaper the entire house with those letters of not yet, not yet, I decided I'm just going to do it myself. And so I started working with people, looking around for artists, and I got people together, and it was like this crazy thing working with artists in different state and emailing back and forth.
Yeah.
But we ended up with a couple of really good comic books, and we did a few conventions, and they sold really well.
Oh, great.
Premonitions and One Angry Koala.
I love the name of that. That's great.
One Angry Koala is this
Yeah.
little comic strip about koalas. And I went to Australia on vacation, and I said koala bear to an Australian, and I thought I was going to have to defend myself physically because they're not bears, they're marsupials. And the way they talked to me just stuck with me, and it turned into a comic book. So, yeah, I like to branch out and do lots of different things.
Yeah, yeah. And I know you really love YA books. So
yeah.
tell me a few authors that you really love to read, or maybe a couple of YAs lately that you love.
I saw Scott Westerfeld here do a talk here, and I had read the Leviathan series before that, and that's one of my favorites. I have two, and that's one of my favorite series. I just love the idea that he put out in this mainstream book with a girl pretending to be a boy in order to be in the Navy to provide service to her country, and then falling in love with somebody who doesn't know a boy who doesn't know she's really a girl. I just found the whole thing really intriguing.
Right, yeah.
And of course, Cassandra Clare's whole set of books, all of the City of books, and I really love the Infernal Devices even better. Don't tell her I said that, but I love them even better. You know,
or her new one, which is Lady Midnight.
Oh, I love Lady Midnight. It was great. And yeah, I just love the whole thing. I love the whole world she built, and it's a good lesson on how to build a very immersive world that people can get into, but you don't necessarily need a scorecard. Like Game of Thrones is amazing. You kind of need a scorecard.
You do. And
so
just
many
a character
people.
and a family tree for each.
And don't get attached to anybody.
Exactly, because they may be gone.
They may be gone in the next book.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, at least with most of Cassandra Clare's, they're not.
They
gonna
stick
be
around.
Gone.
They stick around for a while.
Yeah.
There was one character I forgot to ask you about, and it's the friend of Brett's friend. She's a flapper, and Margaret. Is it Margaret?
Margaret.
Or is it Margaret?
Yeah.
Okay. Tell us about her, because I really liked her.
Margaret is she is a fictitious daughter of the Marshall Field family. So she's this wealthy widow. Her husband passed away in an automobile accident, and he was a rich lawyer, so which left her a lot of money. So she went on this bender after he passed away, and she went from a socialite to being a flapper, and as fiery, fabulous red-headed woman with ideas of her own, and which was very starting to be in vogue in the Roaring '20s. You know, before that it was much different. You know, suffragettes in the 1910s it was kind of frowned upon, and then in the '20s it started to become more popular. So I wanted to have this powerful, free woman with flaws, with issues. I mean, like, she's very human. You know, she comes from this damaged past, and she's really like kind of a mama bear for Jean-Paul and Brett, to help them through their life, and they help her as well make growths that she needs to maybe find love again someday.
Yeah. I really liked her, the way she sort of kind of got them together, gave them advice and that sort of thing. So, the joys of publishing for the first time. Can you tell us a little bit of that? But then also, there's got to have been the frustrations. I mean, and I know winning the pitch Apalooza was so incredible. But then getting down to the work and editing and getting through everything. So tell us some of your frustrations, but tell us some of the joys that came out of the whole process.
I think that I'm going to start with saying there's more joys than there were any kind of tribulations. That's really. I think that comes with the editing. You know, David and Ariel pointed me towards a couple of editors that they had heard about that work with LGBT fiction in particular. And so I worked with this guy named Jerry Wheeler, who
Yeah.
does a lot of editing in the field. And I didn't really know anything about him, so I looked it up, and I'm like, okay, I'll give it a shot. He became an expert in anachronisms. I don't know if he knew anything about the 20s beforehand, but while reading it and giving me notes back, he caught every mistake I made. I think at one point I said, in one of the sentences I said, it's "Don't Rain on My Parade," and he kicked back to me. He said, "I think that's a Streisand song from the '60s, and I don't think you should use that." And I'm like, "Oh, that's hilarious," because he caught everything.
Yeah.
You know,
Wow.
when they didn't have that back then.
Sure.
I think working with the right editor is very important.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, I've had other people edit my book beforehand, and they were very nice about it and everything. He wasn't just nice; he was professional.
Right.
You know, giving
right.
me good advice, and I wouldn't
Yeah.
do this, I would do that. You
Right.
know, leaving
It's
me to, it's mine. I could reject the notes if I wanted to, but I feel like it's a tremendously different book
Right.
than when I first started.
And having an objective source who's good at what they're doing and to
Right.
tell you those types of things, that's
Yeah.
really good.
So that definitely moved me forward towards getting published.
Yeah.
You know.
Now, did you get any advice from any other authors, you know, any other LGBT authors about when you were writing the book, or maybe you had them read and they gave you their reaction and that sort of thing?
Not while I was writing it, but after I wrote it, I started corresponding with some folks, and Robin Reardon is one of them, and she's at Kensington Books, and J.H. Trumbull, and Bart Yates was really amazing, gave me a great quote that ended up on my back cover. Bart Yates, he wrote what I consider, Leave Myself Behind, is what I consider maybe one of the most perfect books I've ever read. And I contacted him, which was kind of a thrill, and he gave me all kinds of positive feedback.
Wow.
Jay Bell is an independent LGBT publisher. He's got the Something Like series, which is amazing. He gave me a lot of feedback, and Wade Kelly and Jeff Adams about marketing, and so it's a nice author community.
No
I haven't
kidding,
felt
yeah.
anybody saying, "Oh no, this is my area." There was none of that. It was all positive. We talked about Andrea earlier.
Yeah.
She actually took me into bookstores and did the shelf searches with me, and like, what is your cover going to look like, and what will it be next to, and you know, for marketing stuff. It was
Yeah.
invaluable,
yeah,
really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it really is amazing, you know, the community of authors and how generous with their time, and
Yeah.
and that, you know, sort of the egos, you know, are out the door, but just sharing and helping each other. I think it's pretty incredible. I hear this over and over and over
Yeah.
again. You know, being in those writer groups or just getting advice and help for each other. It's
It was
really great.
wonderful on blogs, people being helpful on
Yeah.
blogs. Like, sure, you
Yeah.
can post on my blog, you know.
Right.
I think that's great.
Yeah, yeah. So tell us what you're working on now.
I'm working on a steampunk YA book
Oh,
that is set in Victorian era England and Ireland. It's a LGBT themed YA, and it's a trilogy. And I'm halfway done with the first book, so I'm really excited about it. And of course, I've tried not to get overindulged with researching, but you
I know. It's, you can
can't-
go down that rabbit hole.
You can't
But you
help
got to
it,
come
right.
out.
Well, there's like
that.
flying ships and steampunk, you know,
Yeah, well,
and a lot of it.
Yeah.
And I love the whole steampunk genre and the sci-fi aspect of it. And mine mixes with fantasy with some magic elements. And so I research like ships and parts of ships and the mainsails and all that. And you can get bogged down with that stuff.
Yeah,
and
right.
so I'm trying to push
Okay.
through and have fun.
Okay, good. Well, we can't wait to see what that is.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sitting
Sure.
down with me. And
you.
congratulations on the long season, your debut novel. Come back and see us when that steampunk trilogy comes out.
All right.
All right.
Hopefully we'll have another signing.
All right, great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Great conversation with Michael Gurley, one of our local authors with his debut novel. It's called The Long Season. You've got to read it. If you love sports, you love a great romance, and you love the 1920s. Thanks for joining me on Authors Revealed.